Thank you so much for being patient. We're going to go ahead and get started at 5:03 p.m. Michelle, if you can provide the roll call.
Dr. Corbin,
Present.
Allie,
Present.
Casey,
Here.
David. See him. I see him. Okay, David is here. Chris,
Here.
Adrian, Aaron, Sabrina, Suen,
Here.
Matt, Patty,
Here.
Bill,
Here.
Allison,
Present.
Jessica.
Here. Just for the record, Sabrina, Aaron, and Matt are excused for the meeting.
Yes, I have it.
Great, thank you. Do we have public comments?
Yes, we have one person waiting for public comment. I believe Megan's been here before, so she probably knows the rules, but just to restate, each public comment has 2 minutes to speak and we will time. Since we have one person public comment, I will allow this person to speak and they can share their testimony.
Thank you for coming. Go ahead and start.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Good evening. So yes, last month I spoke to you all about the status of the Cleveland High School modernization funding and our Turf Powell Park Committee's advocacy for fair and equitable athletic fields for Cleveland High School students. Since then, actually a week ago, the Portland Public School Board members approved submitting the 2025 general bond obligation package to the Multnomah County Elections Officer for the May 2025 ballot. It includes replacing Cleveland High School and Wells High School. It includes upgrading athletic facilities for Roosevelt, Lincoln, Franklin, Grant High School, as well as creation of athletic hubs at Jackson Middle School and the Marshall campus. It also includes other things like updating curriculum, technology, security systems, and so on. The good news is that we anticipate strong support from Portland families, given the number of schools included in this bond. However, we were a little disheartened when with each iteration it leaves out the words turf fields or Powell Park for Cleveland High School. This time, it means that that language is not in the voters pamphlet. And I'll be the first to admit that that level of detail may not be needed in the voters pamphlet. But it should be coming in modernization design documents and cost summaries, but those were delayed. And we're now being told that cost savings that they are reviewing will be another few weeks out. So in response to our concerns about the missing words turf field and Powell Park, the PPS administration did add to a staff memo, and I quote, new construction of the school facilities, including off-site improvements for Cleveland High School athletics for softball, baseball, and multi-purpose uses. So Cleveland supporters are pretty happy about that acknowledgement in some of their documentation. So I had intended to use my time here to ask if there were any updates on any meetings between Portland Parks and Rec and PPS and PIL Athletics. And then Michelle let me know that just a few hours ago, Michelle let me know that the Deputy City Administrator Schmansky and Director Long will be meeting with PPS next week, or this week, I think. And that's fantastic to hear. And I know lots of supporters who would love to be engaged in any stakeholder meetings about that. So in closing, I just want to use this last bit of my time to continue to urge you to work with PPS leadership on any forward-thinking, mutually beneficial solutions, like a long-term lease of Powell Park to Cleveland High School athletics, similar to the Grant Bowl. I urge you to consider creative solutions. I've mentioned maybe the use of system development charges to invest in turf fields at Powell Park. But it could even be as interesting as
Sorry, just to interrupt you for a second. You are at 2 minutes, so if you can wrap it up.
Okay, that's it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Do we have another public speaker?
That is all.
That is all. Thank you so much. The next is any general announcements. So I have two. Everybody got a draft of the annual report. Please go ahead and email me if there's any updates, particularly around contributions around working groups or any other information that you believe should be added, or if anything that you think needs to be adjusted. Please have it to me by January 25th. The second announcement is that we're gonna have a couple changes in our agenda. And Michelle, please support me and let me know if this is correct. Instead of going with the director's report, we're gonna go into the levy presentation. Yes. So that is the only adjustment to the current agenda. And again, any general announcements? Great, thank you. We're moving to the approval of the December meeting minutes. Do we have a motion to approve the December meeting minutes?
I move to approve.
We have a second.
I second. This is Chris.
Thank you. Do we have any discussion? All right, all those that approve the meeting minutes for December as they are, please either raise your hands or say aye. Michelle, let me know when you have it recorded.
Yes.
All right. Any against approving the meeting minutes? Any abstentions for those who were not here in the December meeting? All right, I believe that is everything. So let's go ahead and move to the levy presentation. Thank you so much for being here. You have the floor. Director Wong, did you want to introduce?
Did you want to say some words, TCA Szymanski?
Sure. I'm waving at the screen. Good evening, everybody. I'm Sonia Szymanski. I've been here once, I think, in this role, maybe twice, but not very recently. Thank you for giving me a chance to come back and reconnect with you in this new year, in this new world, as we're headed into a hopefully interesting and productive conversation about the Parks Levy. I know you're in these dynamics and you're in this content all the time. I'm gonna do a really quick frame up so that you have a sense of how we've shared this context and the bigger picture with council as we've been briefing them. And then I think we go either to you, Director, or to Sarah. Story has many chapters. I think the furthest back relevant place to start is in November, when the previous city council gave our service area and our team direction in a council resolution sponsored by Commissioner Ryan and Mayor Wheeler to build a Parks Levy referral council item package for the next council to consider early in this calendar year. We got started on that, and we also last year briefed Mayor-elect Wilson about this to make sure he knew that that was in motion and to ask for any initial guidance he had about what we should be developing. And he asked us to go ahead and build out a levy referral package that could be referred to the May ballot this year at a rate that would sustain current programming and service levels. So we started working on that. We are ready with that. And in the last week, we've been briefing our new council members, and it's been going really well. They wanted to be briefed by district, which has been really cool to see them together in their district trios and see them with each other. So we finished the last of those 4 briefings this morning. We've given them a rundown, and we've shared with them, one, deep gratitude for making time to talk with us in day 7 of their adventure in this new form of government. that we have time to refer a parks levy expansion or renewal extension if that's their preference. But that there are timing considerations and that they have an opportunity to act on the May ballot, and we didn't want them to miss that window. We've been talking with them. We've been sharing also how, at a really high level, the levy decision point interacts with the budget process that they're in now. And really, in a nutshell, kind of at my level of understanding, we've been sharing that we are building a 25-26 budget that has significant reductions in it that are not attributable to the levy being in its last year, but which would be mostly or entirely solved for by an expanded levy referred in the May ballot, if passed. So we wanted them to kind of understand those hydraulics when we spoke with them. And we've been giving them a walk through this presentation that Sarah is going to show you. They are parkies, they're Portlanders, and Portlanders love their parks, including our council. It's been really, really affirming to hear that their questions are informed and engaged. And we've had a generally very positive reception to the information we've shared. They understand the trade-offs, they understand the moving pieces, and they're asking really good questions. Where we've left it is we are here and ready and eager to support them as they're talking with each other and with the mayor about their preferred path forward. None of them and none of us have any idea how they're supposed to do that. But as they figure it out, we'll be available and here to help them with information so they can make a good, informed, early, important choice in their time on this council. Last kind of practical note, I should have said this earlier. In order to be, you may know this already, on the May ballot, their window for referral is in February. So they could take up a referral action in their February 5th meeting or their February 19th meeting. That would be by the skin of our teeth, but that would be technically possible. And you sort of feel when you say February and they're like, February. So, you know, more time is better on a decision that is big and that has a lot of moving parts. And I'm hopeful that they're gonna, you know, keep moving the ball forward and get to a really informed decision soon. Sarah or director, is there anything else I've been saying to them I should say here?
No, you've got the spiel.
So that's where we are, yeah, 5 times in.
I don't need to add anything at this point. I think Sarah's just gonna, we'll just pass it over to Sarah to run through the presentation that we've given the council members and then if anyone has any questions, of course, or will be yours. We have enough time.
Any questions? The board wants to, the floor is open.
So what's the option if February can't,
Comes and goes?
Yeah.
November is an option and next May is an option.
that's cutting it close, right?
Yeah, you know,
Well,
the, like I said, the budget that we're building has a lot of cuts in it and most probably it would be implemented. So we would start to see service level impacts. And Sarah can tell you more clearly than I can what it looks like to start building into a potential future with no levy.
and a November referral would require, a November ballot would require a July, at least by July.
Okay.
Thank you. Sue-Ann, go ahead.
What is the effect with the effectiveness to put the levy on the May ballot together side by side with the PPS? They are asking for much different amount. Is that, it's like, I don't want to say good or bad,
Yeah.
but it's just what kind of effect is that gonna impact our timing and verbiage, and how would the public actually be able to react to that?
Council's asking that too. I'm asking that too. Every consultant you asked would probably give you a different read on the dynamics. there are different schools of thought about whether it is helpful to be among other measures or helpful to be alone on a ballot as a funding measure. There are different schools of thought about whether it's helpful to be smallest or not, or a levy or a bond. What I know for absolutely sure is that the polling we did was very positive. And the polling we did was on likely May voters. And Todd reminds us that in 2020, we were on a very crowded ballot and we did very well and not everything did. So that's pieces that I think it's not a complete answer because I don't know really.
Jessica, please go ahead.
Yes, I wanted to understand a little bit more. You said if the levy were to pass at the rate that wouldn't affect operations, you said it would maybe reduce any or all like cuts that were needed. So would that, does that apply to the other just larger citywide general fund cuts that are being asked?
Yes,
So
of the
it's-
Parks Bureau, yes.
Okay, wow.
It would be
that's good.
sufficient to prevent the cuts that are being contemplated and put together as options for July, this July.
Okay. Okay.
That gets really complicated
Yeah.
really quickly, so follow-ups to be handled by.
Okay.
Do you have anybody on?
I don't see any virtual hands, so, Casey?
Always me. Sarah's probably gonna answer this in her presentation. But I just want to go back that at the November 20th hearing, the catch was there was nothing about maintenance. And that kind of put a wrench into what we were trying to do before. So all I've heard so far is levy financing. It's somewhere along the line, I'd like to find out how we're going to address maintenance.
I can say briefly, and thank you for that, it has come up in our briefings, it's very much on our mind. And I suspect we're very much aligned about the importance and urgency of that. We did poll a bond option as a freestanding question, and yes, Sarah will speak to that. The citywide conversation about major maintenance is that we'd like to do it as a city rather than bureau by bureau, need by need, whoever kind of raises their hand and gets on a ballot first. So the guidance that we've gotten from the mayor and administrator is that we should be starting to think about a citywide bonding strategy. We've gone as far as putting together and sending in, to central, our lists of needs to start informing how big, like what's the order of magnitude we're talking about citywide. That information will come to council as soon as there's any room in the docket, and they can work with the mayor to give guidance about how far and how fast to go, putting together a potential referral strategy. And gosh, I had one more thought and I lost it. That was probably.
Lynn, I guess maybe
I
you're
have
gonna
a
finish
quick,
us off.
quick
Yeah.
question here, because I know the city council is also trying to get support to bring on more administrative help, right? If that is not going forward effectively, efficiently, that affect the timing of being able to have everything lined up in February for the May ballot. I mean, is there something, and then also what you just mentioned, if we look at all the facility that needs maintenance, care, how will that then affect the decision making whether or not maintenance topic is gonna be part of May, or it's never
Yeah,
gonna be May?
I think
or-
it will be in the conversation. It's not currently in the referral. That's a policy choice for council. I recalled what I was gonna say, which is there's also appetite to go to a citywide funding strategy, bigger even than just bond strategy. Because of the timing of this levy, we are a little bit out of sequence and we are talking with people as a freestanding question, policy question. I have the same question about how can we possibly process this discussion by February. What I will say is they made time to meet with us and they all met with us and they were all engaged. And Counselor Green asked a follow-up question yesterday, responded to the response with appreciation. So they're pretty leaned in and I think we can stay there.
Jessica, do you have another question?
Really short one.
Alright.
Are they being approached by anybody else in the city for a different measure on the May ballot? Or is this the only one internally?
I believe this is the only one.
If we can go ahead and move towards.
All right, let's do it.
Sure. I'm gonna have to excuse myself during the presentation and then I'll be right back. Thank you.
Do you need help with anything, Dr. Corbin? Can we help you with anything?
Yeah, if you can join me.
All right. Thank you, Director Long, and thank you, DCA Schmansky, very much. Appreciate the setup. As DCA Schmansky mentioned, I'm going to share the slide deck that we shared with the council district offices and the council members themselves. So really, we queued up for them the near-term briefing points of a choice about a levy rate. So the levy could expire. The levy's funding about 50% of the Bureau's operations. So Portlanders would experience about 50% operational reductions in services. It could be renewed at its present rate. The 80-cent rate per $1,000 of assessed value, we're estimating that over the next 5-year window of a parks levy, that would result in about 25% reduction in services. Or it could see an increased rate. And we're forecasting a $1.60 rate would be enough to sustain essentially the services that we're excited to share with council tomorrow night in the year 3 levy report. So last year, kind of the full year of the levy up at full force, that level of services. We also shared with them considerations around timing. So if they're considering something that might result in service reductions, kind of the longer window they have to build into what that reduction would look like will feel less abrupt for our community. Or if they're looking to either renew the levy or put together a levy with an increased rate, then of course, ballot referral timelines. And as Sonia mentioned, February 19th being the last date to refer something to this May's ballot, or July being the timeframe to refer something for November. And then there is May of 26 as well. We shared a little bit about what the park system entails. So 11,000 acres.
Sarah?
Yes.
I don't know if you mean to switch between slides, but right now we only see the view of the first slide.
I am switching between slides, so let me back up. Are you seeing only a title slide?
Yeah.
We're basically seeing as if you are not in a presentation mode and it's at the first slide.
Interesting. I am in a presentation mode. Let me try sharing one more time.
Yeah.
Thank you for letting me know.
I realize between your pauses, you might.
Yes. Okay. Are you seeing it once again?
Yes, but now we're seeing your view of presentation mode. And
Oh
that
my
might
goodness.
be what
Oh
you-
my goodness. Hold on. Goodness
Sarah,
gracious.
five times not a charm?
I suppose not. Okay, let's try this screen, which should be fully already in presentation mode.
Yes.
Okay, and then I'm going to advance. So as I was talking through kind of the various decision points and briefing points that we shared with them, this is what I was looking at. So in sharing about our park system, we have about 11,000 acres within the city, 8,000 of which are natural areas. And we also shared sort of the breadth of some of the experiences and assets in the park system, everything from playgrounds, community centers, pools, community gardens, 1.2 million trees in the park system, and then all of the programming and activation that occurs in those spaces as well. So the camps, the classes, all of the, the swim lessons, all of the great activities that are occurring out in the park system. We also shared that not just parks, but all of the services actually provided by vibrant communities have been supported by Portland voters through the decades. So there's sort of a history of voters wanting higher levels of service from the services provided by vibrant communities than the general fund alone has provided. From a parks perspective, the last parks bond was in 2014, so it was a $68 million bond, and that is fully concluded successfully, but there are no bond dollars remaining. And the levy, of course, is the 2020 Parks levy that was passed by voters in November. And we're coming up on the decision point about what to do for the next 5 years. I also want to just point out here sort of the succession of levies and bonds, and that those on the park side have been regularly used, sort of similar to how Portland Public Schools has used levies and bonds together. So the levy itself, a 5-year operating focused levy, raising about $48 million a year, and generally focusing on supporting services categorized in 3 areas. So recreation for all, protecting and growing nature, and community partnerships. We're also excited to share the good news with them, which I hope you received from Director Long, about the results of the Parks Levy performance audit. So that was a commitment made to voters to conduct an independent performance audit of the levy, and we received the report of that final audit in December. The audit found that Portland Parks was using levy dollars in accordance with Parks levy commitments and had good financial and tracking systems in place to account for all of where the dollars were going. So it was a clean audit with no recommendations. So we're excited to share that news with them as well. A little flavor of what the Parks Levy does, and I would encourage you all, if you haven't already, to read the Year 3 Levy Report, because there's a lot of great detail, not just sort of accounting for all of the dollars and far more performance data, but some really great interviews and stories in that report as well. But Recreation for All includes really operations of all of the programs within the park system. Over 1 million visits to recreation programs and sites last year by Portlanders, over 100,000 meals served. That's a lot of meals at the free lunch and play program, but also at the Schools Uniting Neighborhood sites throughout Portland. And over 10,000 swim lesson participants that got to take advantage of that. We also got to share about the Schools to Pools program, bringing Portland Public Schools second graders into community centers to learn swim lessons. So a lot of excitement about the programming happening in support or supported by the Parks Levy. And then we also shared about the Access Discount Program. So this is the program allowing Portlanders to choose up to 90% off as a discount the cost of access to classes, programs, community centers, and pools. And through the 3 years of the levy so far, we've seen increasing usage of that Access Discount Program. So just over $4 million were used last year by nearly or over 18,000 Portlanders in that program. And that compares to about $600,000, which was the maximum that the Bureau had ever been able to give out in scholarships prior to the Parks Levy. When it comes to taking care of parks and natural areas, we've categorized that under Protect and Grow Nature. And that includes everything from about 45% increase in the staff out there in parks who are doing all of the sort of daily and basic maintenance that you can imagine. So emptying the trash cans, inspecting and making repairs on playgrounds. We've seen also a 64% increase in the staff in what's called the Professional Repair and Maintenance Services team. So there's carpenters, plumbers, electricians. Those aren't staff that are doing sort of capital maintenance, big maintenance projects, but they are helping to improve the condition of assets out in the park system. This also includes programming in our natural areas, over 6,000 participants in nature-related programming in parks, and over 3,000 trees planted in priority neighborhoods in Portland. So those are neighborhoods that have low tree canopy and higher percentages of households living with lower incomes and Portlanders of color. For the most part, the levy is supporting services that Portland Parks and Recreation was already providing to Portlanders. We do have some areas where the levy is supporting whole new areas of service, and proactive tree maintenance is one of those. So a whole new team has come on board. They're performing tree inspections and maintaining trees in parks and natural areas. And this is a map showing all of the locations in Portland where trees were inspected, and based on the inspection results, park and natural area trees were maintained. This really helps to improve the health of trees in our parks and our natural areas, and also reduces risk for our community using those areas. And there's also a significant emphasis on community partnerships. So doing this together with the community. Almost 400,000 hours of volunteer time in the park system. It looks like a variety of things, but I think it also looks like all of you attending these Parks Board meetings and participating as Parks Board members. But it also includes coaches in sports teams or people out there deadheading roses. There's lots of ways that Portlanders engage with their park system. Over $2 million in grants awarded to partner organizations. That really has helped to expand the reach of programming and bolster the types of things that Portland Parks is able to offer. And we've also been able to open the doors of community centers and for free or low cost, allow other organizations to do their own programming in those community centers, also expanding access. So we also shared, knowing that the levy was sort of coming up on its 5-year decision window, what we heard from voters when we did voter polling. And again, this was polling that we did of likely May of 2025 voters. So first we did polling in November of 2023. The full poll results are available on the Park Sustainable Future website. So I'm just sharing high-level summaries at this juncture. But we saw high levels of satisfaction with park services. For the concept of a straight renewal of the 80-cent levy, we saw 76% support. Knowing that we had a significant capital maintenance backlog, we also separately polled the concept of a capital bond. This was sort of a split poll, so one half got polling about the levy, the other half got polling about a bond. And we saw 57% support there for a $600 million bond. In between that polling and some later polling that we did in July of 2024, we had a couple of things happen. So on the revenue side, we got some reduced revenue forecasts from the city economist to the tune of about $6 million a year less levy revenue than had been previously forecast. That primarily was due to decreased assessed value of commercial properties in the downtown core. On the expenditure side, we're continuing to see higher expenditures that then had been built into the forecast. So in the first 3 years of the parks levy, per personnel hour worked, we've seen a 35% increase. So expenditures, the growth of expenditures has been outpacing the growth of the levy as a revenue resource. So knowing that an 80-cent levy, when we redid the 5-year forecast, was going to result in about 25% service reductions, we went out again and did some polling. We continued to see very high levels of satisfaction, 77% with park services. And also here we asked how important parks were to people's quality of life and saw 79% on that. For an increased rate, so a $1.60 rate, we also saw 64% support in that poll. And when we explicitly asked people whether they would rather increase the rate to maintain service levels, renew a levy at the current rate, but experience some service level declines, or let the levy expire entirely, we saw the majority of those people say they wanted to increase the rate and maintain services. So here I'm bringing it all together with some of the polling that we've done since May of 2020. A couple things that I want to point out. First, the polling that we're seeing at the top line for the $1.60 rate is almost identical to the polling that we saw in May of 2020 for the 80-cent rate. So 54% with the ballot language, that's literally the question that you see in the ballot pamphlet alone, nothing else. And then the plain language gives a couple more sentences description of what that actually means. Second to the bottom, you actually see the results of the November 2020 election as well, which is very in line with what the polling had been in May of 2020. DCA Schmansky mentioned some timing considerations. So technically, from kind of a fiscal year collection standpoint, the levy could be renewed as late as May of 2026 and still have sort of a seamless each fiscal year collection. Beyond May of 2026, you have a gap. So the sort of 80 cents that you have foot in the door, if you will, of an existing levy goes away. Anything else beyond that is kind of a new thing. Working back from May of 2026, the earlier that something is referred, sort of the less implementation of planned service reductions would need to be taken. Or another way to think about it is the longer the ramp, city council and the service area and you all have to work together to figure out what kinds of service reductions are going to happen and how to implement them. So for example, if you went in May, you would have the results of that election before this January 1st budget that's being prepared has to take effect. If you went in November, you wouldn't yet know the outcome of an election by the time this budget that's being prepared starts in July 1st. And of course, if you wait until May of 2026, that's one more year on top of that. So those are some of the timing considerations that we've shared with them. And then we had just ended the conversations again with those briefing points for them to consider and take away. All right, that concludes the sort of the presentation and the content that we shared with them. And I'm happy to answer any questions, and I can leave slides up or take them down.
Thank you so much. So the board, you have the floor if you want to ask any questions. Please raise your hand if you are online, and if you're in person, please go ahead and put your name card on the side and we'll call you in order. If you can help me out, Michelle.
I have Ally on the screen.
Hey there. Thank you for that presentation. That was super helpful and answered some questions I had. I am curious about, doubling the rate while not providing additional, or not mostly services staying the same. And it's good to see that people were still supportive of it, although it did decrease in support. I'm wondering what the history is of rate increases over time, and has it ever been doubled like this before? Is there a history of it being such a large jump? I know in a time when folks are really tired of inflation and everything costing more, the optics of it aren't my favorite. So I'm glad you did polling, but I'm curious about it.
Yeah, within our service area, so the Portland Children's Levy is on its 4th iteration. It's also a local option levy that's been renewed every 5 years. It has not changed the rate. It is primarily entirely a grant-making levy, though, so it gives grant dollars out the door. So how it is approached, leaving the rate the same, is effectively giving sort of less and less grant dollars out the door each year. Others in the room, I don't know if I am not personally aware of any sort of sustained service performing the service themselves local option levy where they have increased the rate levy to levy. But this is a response of kind of the two trajectories of increasing costs to provide the services and then property tax revenues effectively not rising at sort of the more typical 3 to 4% rate.
The only thing I tried to take myself off mute. Only thing I would add is comparatively, and I don't think voters would do this, but on the policy level, you look at what the other levy rates are out there. And like the Portland Public Schools levy rate is $2 per thousand of assessed value. Ours is 80 cents right now, and the doubling would be $1.60. So the Parks and Recreation levy rate would still be lower than what's currently be assessed by Portland Public Schools.
But it probably is, to your question, this is Sonia, and it's a great question. There aren't probably a lot of instances where sequential levies are being proposed at higher rates to cover the same suite and level of programs and services. I can't think of another circumstance of 2 in a row where it went up and the conversation was about meaningfully, materially higher rate for what is essentially the same product. So that would be new. You know, the school bonds are just bigger and bigger and bigger as far as the eye can see. So there's probably something instructive in that, but I do think this is unique in some ways.
Thank you. Any follow-up questions, Ally?
No, not at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Have anybody else online?
If Casey.
Casey, go ahead, and then to Jessica.
Thank you, and thanks, Sarah, always appreciate it. So I don't know if I heard it or didn't see it. With 1.6 mill rate, about what do you anticipate that being annually in terms of income?
Yeah, I think it ranges from about 95 million to about 105 over that 5-year window.
And are you building into it in terms of, and I assume it's a 5-year bond or 5-year levy? Are you building into it an assumption of a 3% to 4% increase in value of property over that period? Do you know?
Claudio, are you on the call?
I am. So the rate increases, or rather, the revenue estimates that were generated by our consultant PSU for this work was they would assume just the standard 3% increase allowable by Measure 50. So they would not be taking into account any econometric forecasts around changes in real market value and any assessed market value changes there, nor would they be taking into account any additional development. So really would they're looking at just the existing all existing properties and escalating them at 3% assessed value to the degree that that's allowable under Measure 5 and 50, that interaction.
Thank you, Claudia. And just really, the last one's just a comment. So I understand what we're basically doing, as noted, was doubling the rate, doubling the amount of income. But on the other side, if we maintain the same rate, we're only losing 25% of programming. So that doesn't, in my mind, that doesn't really, there's not an equilibrium. And that's just a comment.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Casey. Go ahead.
Jessica.
Jessica,
Jessica.
it was Jessica, then Adrian, but it sounded like somebody wanted to come in with a comment or a follow-up to what Casey said. Okay, Jessica, go ahead.
I was just looking at the slide 58, where it says the polling information in July 2024. Am I reading this correctly, that polling for a higher levy rate was more favorable? Okay, is there more information on that? It's an interesting number to see.
Sarah, do you want to talk about the expire renew increase on slide 12? You want to pull it back up?
Because what I'm talking about is the slide 58 where it says in July 2024, the option to renew at the same level, at the current level, or increase, and but the polling showed 64% supporting $1.60, but only 55% supporting at the current rate.
I think it was page 58.
Yeah.
It was page 58 in the packet.
Is this the slide you were looking at?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a very
Oh,
interesting
you're muted, Sarah.
number to me. Yep. So I just didn't know if there was a little bit more detail behind that.
Yeah, there is. That's a great question. So, so in the July 2024 polling, we gave people information that the 80-cent rate would result in some service reductions. So I think that's what you're seeing there is it's not just an 80-cent and you could get the same services, but there was actual narrative description of some reduction of services associated with that.
Okay, follow-up. Right, Adrian?
Yes, thanks. Yeah, I was a little bit alarmed hearing from Administrator Szymanski that the council may be looking at, the mayor might be looking at wanting to lump together maintenance costs, you know, going after more funding or for maintenance costs, a bond or however it would be done. And I'm wondering if the same risk is there for operating cost levies. Do you have any read on that? And I guess, you know, as a citizen, the reason I was somewhat alarmed, and I was obviously as a strong park supporter, you know, they're going after sort of a large chunk of money to, in a sense, take care of what has been bad management over so much time, you know, may not be seen that favorably by citizens. And so anyway, it's kind of a twofold question, wondering what the political read is on that.
Yeah, look, thank you for that. I expect that we're gonna be having a conversation about major and deferred maintenance when we talk about this referral decision point. I don't have a sense that there's a lot of energy to necessarily add capital maintenance as a use for this levy. What people, the questions are more, well, this solves for half the problem, but you have a separate problem that's really big and every day it's bigger, and what's the solution for that? And that's when we start talking about citywide bond strategy. That's not really satisfying. I feel that from them, I feel that personally myself. So what I think is that we need to be ready to talk about that and probably agree with that as a thing that needs to be solved for. But I don't have a sense that major maintenance, capital maintenance is necessarily going to be part of what this is expected to pay for.
Right. What about lumping together operating levies? So is there going to be, I know at one point, combining with, if I'm remembering, fire and emergency services, et cetera. Yeah, so how's that conversation going, or even perhaps other areas being lumped with this?
We are talking to them only about parks, and we're talking only about this operating levy. I think that's the only funding measure conversation that they're having right now. The kind of opportunistic alignment of different funding measures that was more possible in the previous form of government. You know, I got a need, my neighbor has a need, let's go do a measure together. That's not happening like in this new structure. We're not really built for that. So anything is possible, but we're not hearing about combining.
Good. Thanks.
Thank you. I have a question, and for those Portlanders that are not as versed on what levies are and what does a levy do and what doesn't it do? What is a fund? What doesn't it fund? Can you provide a clarification for our community members?
I think Sarah can do that best.
I'm happy to take a stab at it. So local option levies can be used for operations. They can be used for capital things. They are restricted for 5-year windows by state statute if they are used in any way for operations. So that's a time limitation. The suite of services for Portland Parks that the levy can fund is effectively what was in the ballot measure. So what the ballot measure described as the types of services that a levy could fund is what it's going for. That's actually why we've been so diligent, if you will, about doing our tracking and our reporting, linking back directly to those 15 commitments that were in the ballot pamphlet to try to make it really clear, both on the performance side and the accounting side, where all of the dollars are going and what performance they're leading to. Other levies can be used, you know, Portland Public School uses their levies for teachers and providing services in the schools. That's what they took to voters. Does that answer the question, or are there more follow-up questions?
I have a follow-up question, because sometimes funding for particular capital improvements or operations, or I'm thinking specifically of like maybe having a stronger Wi-Fi service could actually lead to community groups renting out spaces and bringing in money. So when we're thinking about the levy and we're thinking about funding particular things, how is that in conversation with revenue generating within the park system?
the sort of the approach that we have taken, based on our city attorney's advice, is because this is an operating levy, we really look at whether something is an expense that is landing in the operating budget, or whether it is an expense that is landing on the CIP side of the budget. So it's which budget something goes in. Beyond that, there have been things, I'm thinking big technology improvements like the micromain replacement project, that because the levy is not the only funding source that the Bureau has, we can have more levy go to something maybe like swim lessons or other sorts of operations, and free up other non-levy dollars for some of those things that might otherwise fall into sort of the capital wheelhouse, but might be able to either be an efficiency or an improvement or a revenue generation idea.
So when you say operations, and again, this is just to clarify it for everyday folk, are we talking about programming, programs? Would that be a synonym? Would that be
More than that?
Programs, materials.
Claudio, do you want to describe sort of the nature of the operating budget as a mechanism?
Or maybe let me take a crack at it.
Okay.
For a community center, think of the building being with the B, bond, and its major repairs being for the bond. But the water in the pool, the electricity, the staff you see, all of the basketballs you see, that would be all on the operating side, and that would be the parks levy.
Great, thank you so much. And
Sure.
then capital improvements. It was explained to me that basically if you took a building, turned it upside down, shook it, everything out, everything that's left is considered to be capital
That's a
and
good
capital
way to do it.
improvements, right? All right, so is that,
$10,000 threshold as well.
all right, so just for those who are trying to tease apart or try to understand, these are the things that we're talking about.
Get
correct?
ready to be quoted in a council meeting.
Yeah, that's good, that's good. I like
A city planner in Oakland told me that, and I
Attributed to you.
and I have been
That's
using it
good.
ever since. So, okay, so just for those that are out there trying to figure out what do these words mean in real tangible ways?
Mhm.
All right, thank you. And it looks like there's a hand up on the screen. Casey?
Yeah, I did, and
Yeah,
if any,
please go ahead.
I don't wanna hog the floor, but if no one else has got a question, I'll keep going.
No, you're good.
All right, so here's my concern about the separation between levy and bond, operations and maintenance. I think as you're projecting in terms of what the money that's coming in and what it's going to be used for, there's an assumption that the assets that are in place are going to be basically the same throughout the 5-year period, and we know that's not right. So have we done an overlay on top of this to determine what assets will possibly fail to the point that they cannot support operations during the 5-year period? And I know what you guys have been doing in the past, which is basically plugging things in with glue and duct tape in order to make it all work. But I'm getting concerned that it's getting to the point that it's just going to overflow us. I'm wondering if anybody's done that kind of analysis.
More holistic approach is what you're asking for, Casey. Is that correct?
Yeah, because again, I think what we're doing is that we're assuming the assets are going to be there in order to deliver the programming that we're asking for we're telling the public we're going to provide as part of this levy. But what happens when those assets fail? And do we have any idea in terms of those assets that might fail during this period?
And just to bring a historical lens to it, some of these assets probably came into play during like the playground movement that are like 100 years old, 50 years old. And so they're atrophying and they need to be replaced. And so just to put that perspective, but please, you can answer or take a stab at answering Casey's concern.
I think there's a real answer, but I'll say briefly, it has come up in our briefings. It has come up between us. That is a very real concern. Your operations money will start to outstrip your ability to house it in your buildings and actually deliver it. So I think that's just a really insightful flag, and I share the. Sorry.
Sarah, would you like to start?
Sure. Yeah. So we have worked with our asset and development team to put together a list of assets throughout the park system that are in sort of the most or the worst condition, the most poor condition, and therefore could be the most likely ones to fail in sort of a near-term 5-year scenario. We have regularly been sharing that, including we did share that with then Mayor-elect Wilson as well in that same briefing. We also have, we can share out a link, but we do have a public GIS map as well that shows assets in the park system and their condition. So if people are curious about an asset in particular, or maybe a type of assets, you can see sort of where throughout the park system things are and what condition they're in. So we have been sharing kind of those sites and those facilities.
Casey, I don't know, on the dollar and cents side, I felt like maybe that your question was a little on that side. An example might be Mount Scott Community Center has been closed for renovations. So that did create some savings from that facility. And where we could, we expanded operations at East Portland Community Center. We expanded hours at nearby pools, so we increased expenditures in other places. And then in some cases, when the asset fails, we literally close it and there's a demolition and it's removed from service. And so there is a little less expenditures there on like the maintenance side, but it's not huge. I'll just mention one other dynamic. I know this is almost more financial planning that we talk about tomorrow with your subcommittee or later this week. But when new facilities open up, the Parks Levy is paying for the operation and maintenance of those new facilities. And so one of those big facilities that's on the horizon is the North Portland Aquatic Center. And so when that facility opens, it will be this Parks Levy that we're talking about would be the one that would help pay for it.
Thank you. Thought I saw Ally with a hand up.
I did, and I'm hedging on my question. I mean, I will ask it. I'm wondering if the higher rate would harm or potentially change people's opinions on future bonds to move forward. And if what the balance is between the levy bond dance.
I think what we've seen is that when they're on when we've pulled them together, like to be on the same ballot, they don't do as well. And that the levy always seems to do better, but I don't know how it would impact somebody's thought process if, for instance, we did a bond a year after the levy. Like, I get the sense that people actually separate those in their minds, but.
Can you speak to maybe how it impacts people's pockets and how they look at that? I mean, a bond versus a levy?
How in terms of like, how
Actual
much more
impact.
expensive it would have been if a bond, if.
How
it
does
was-
one feel it as a
I don't know the
as a
answers.
resident?
Yeah, so the median household impact on the current Parks Levy is $150 a year, is that right? About.
Yep, right about that. In terms of a bond, when we looked at how much it would take to raise kind of the $600 million bond, we were looking over kind of a 14-year spend window. Because bonds are outside of compression, so all properties pay as opposed to levies, where some households are at sort of the maximum that they can pay based on the state law around that. It would have been a lower rate to sort of generate the same amount via a bond than it would have been for a levy. I'll stop there.
She could go on.
And I'm wondering, does that make a difference to everyday Portlanders? Like, you keep a park, you might have to pay $15 a month over the next couple of years. Would that, couching it in that way, would that be a little bit more palatable than thinking about it in large lump sums over time? Just a question of like how people are thinking through this and what they may hedge on.
I don't think we don't mention the amounts. It's sort of like when people say, is that tax deductible? And I'm like, go ask your accountant, right? Like, so we know what the rate is, but we don't calculate what the impact's gonna be. We'll say like maybe the median income would pay X, and that's just sort of like an example or a sample. So
I'm just
unless
wondering if
people
that
are
would be
doing the
helpful.
math themselves, which I doubt they are.
I'm just wondering if that would be more like, it's a,
Right,
less than a cup of coffee a
Right.
day
Right,
sort of
right. For
situation.
50 cents a day.
Yeah, I mean, to make it again, to understand having a great park system that has all of these assets and opportunities and functions. If we put it into what is actually coming out of your pocket each month or on a daily basis, would that be more palatable for people to take in?
There's absolutely, there are almost endless stories to talk to and ways to talk to people about how they value the park system and what it is providing community and how they have historically and are being invited to continue investing in it and to put it in context with other things in their life so they can scale it is a very common way to help people intuit what you're talking about. So I hear you and I agree.
And I also think that there's a role, so like if/when council refers this to the ballot in May, and there's, between now and then, there will be a lot of work that needs to be done, and a part of that is education and doing exactly that, like sort of contextualizing it for folks.
Yeah, because I don't think people have a problem paying taxes, paying into things, if they can actually see the outcome benefiting them. It's when you're paying your taxes and you're just like,
where's it going?
it's, one of the jokes is like, it was almost cheaper to lower the streets than to fill the potholes, right? That sort of situation, so just something to think about when discussing it. Patty, go ahead.
For the pool, was that part of the money for the pool from the bond or from SDCs? And then the levies is gonna help operate it when it gets built.
Yeah, the capital funding to build the new pool is coming from a $15 million grant that we got support for from the state of Oregon. And then the rest of it is coming from park system development charges, which are paid by developer fees when we build new.
Just wanna be clear, cause I thought there was some more to it than just as parks.
And we have about 10 more minutes just to make sure that we do get the director's report in and the other reports in. But Jessica, go ahead.
Yeah, I was thinking about Ally's comment earlier about, the history of levy renewals at a higher rate in consecutive levies. And is there like internal sort of messaging around why now, but there's not in 5 years gonna be, let's keep it high, like how we're capping the increase need? Like why there is a need for an increase now, but it's not gonna just keep escalating? Like is there like an internal kind of recognition that and why a voter might say, okay, it's increasing now, but who's to say it's not gonna, the way that we're operating the park system isn't just gonna keep escalating? Like, I guess, you get what I'm saying there?
I totally hear what you're saying. So it's a matter of like what the services the community and the council wants out of its park system, right? And then what does that cost? And generally, like public services generally are reducing their services. Cuts at schools, cuts in the gas tax, cuts in the arts tax, cuts in the children's levy, right? All these agencies are generally reducing services to balance budget. The question for the council and the community is, do you want that? Or do you want the services that are being offered? And which services do you prefer? We're here to professionally manage them for you. And I think the year 3 report of the Parks Levy does a really good job of showing where we might be at our maximum service level of what the park system that we currently have today offers. And then there's about 8 or 9 pages in the back, we call them functional areas, but it shows how much general fund goes to it and how much parks levy by site and by program. the community and the council gets to say, you know what? We want a little less of that. Let's zero that one out. We want more of this one. Or that's the opportunity, if you will, you know, that we all have together to kind of choose. And then why it's so bad right now with this bigger increase is we went through crazy inflation, everyone did. So you either experience shrinkage or inflation, right? Of how businesses and everybody tried to get it to land. And on our side, at the government side, all we had was inflation. So now the question is, do we want to shrink services? Or do we want to pay for them and keep them going, but it will cost more?
It's shrinking services while also accounting for an increased population. And a population that are increasingly won't have a backyard and green space. And so I think it's more of a unique issue than maybe we need more streets or something like that. And so again, how do we speak to that change in accommodating more people while also trying to uphold or even increase the green spaces to accommodate the population growth and the ecosystem services that go along with that, as far as heat waves and flooding and all these other things that is important as an ecosystem service and a critical infrastructure to the city. And I'm curious how that's going to be discussed during this time. Just really quickly, I think, do we have Casey?
Yes.
And then Patty, did you want to jump
No,
in?
I'm good.
Okay.
Thanks, and this may be a good last question. I think you guys want to get this before council on the February 12th agenda. And if that's so, our meeting is the night before. So the question to you guys and also the board is, what do you want us to do before then? What can we do before then? Before then, you know, I think everybody's in support of trying to, of wanting to help. But I'm not sure how we can do that. If we want to do a letter, if we want to do a position, we're going to have to provide Corbin or Ally or someone else with the authority to do that. So how can we help?
You have a bit more time. The council's options are their meeting on the 5th or on the 19th. And if I'm betting, it's the 19th if it's in February. You all know a lot more than I do about how you historically have engaged and how you prefer to engage. None of us know very much about how council likes to be engaged with, but hey, let's pilot something. Your perspective is, I mean, I'll point back at the last 10 minutes of conversation. Your perspective is invaluable. And if you have one on this, I would hope, really hope that it would be part of what council understood as they were talking with each other and with the mayor about their preferred path forward.
And in terms of what form that takes, of course, you know, the board as a body has always either entrusted a few to either compose a letter. But I would say, you know, we have a little bit of time to work on something, but they are mulling it now. And they're going to have follow-up conversations with the mayor soon. And so I would think that timely education appropriate.
We also have the board annual report coming in, so we can use
Yes.
that as reference.
Yes, with that said, I thought I saw Jessica and then Sue-Ann. Once we get through these questions, or statements or comments, I would like to propose maybe an ad hoc committee to think about a focused letter regarding the levy. I love that you want to pull Ally and I into writing letters, but I also want to make sure that both of us have the capacity to do a good job. And so I want to turn it back to the board that those who are interested, let's go ahead and think about an ad hoc committee whose sole purpose is to get this levy support letter or informational letter together. So I'll leave that there. Jessica, did you wanna?
No, I'm good.
Okay, Sue Ann, go ahead.
Sorry, quickly, based on what we have been discussing, I'm kind of rethinking our annual report letter. Just in general, I think it's a little bit, almost get to a bit too nitty-gritty. And looks like we will have another letter. Perhaps it's focusing on the February conversation on the levy or bond.
I
is
would
that right?
prefer a complete separation between the annual report,
Yeah,
which reflects the work that the board does. And has done over the year and a half, and then a separate letter that is specifically speaking to the levy.
it will be almost good to highlight a little bit more on how what we have been doing is also very much hone into this whole discussion about the deferred maintenance levy, so that we did a lot of things, but I felt like the annual report letter can be a little bit more distilled, succinct, and then when we do the bond levy discussion, that letter, it almost becomes kind of like, we understand that here we are again, and then it becomes much more powerful as the
Like they're in
message.
conversation with each other, but two separate documents.
Right,
Okay.
right. When it's a report and the other one is like, remember what we said over there that's so important? Now we want to hone into that.
I would, just thinking about it, I think both documents need to stand alone,
Yeah, yes.
but it can be complementary, if that makes sense. And
Yeah.
so, again, because we do have time and this is being talked about, again, please, before January 25th, anything that you want to add to the annual report, understanding that it is reflecting on the board's work. But the thoughts about having an ad hoc committee specifically to, one, write the letter and possibly give testimony, if that's an opportunity to talk about it with council. Opening up the floor to the board on thoughts of that, I'm gonna give us 5 minutes. Any thoughts, or anybody wants to affirm their commitment to this potential letter?
I'll help Casey if he leads.
Dr. Burby?
Yes.
I have a,
Oh, yeah, go ahead, please.
so just a suggestion. We know the council has 2 council dates in February. If we can wrap up the letter, actually, we don't even have to wrap it up just yet, but if the board could get on the February 5th meeting to present the annual report, that will give them some face time. And whatever your approach or your strategy is with regards to mentioning the levy in the annual report and then going deeper on a letter. And then someone could testify on the 19th at, if there's a referral, and either read the letter or do testimony, separate testimony. So we could potentially get you seen at both meetings.
So it sounds like we have two potential deadlines. What would be the deadline for, I work on deadlines or else I wouldn't ever turn anything in. So for the February 5th, what would be the deadline necessary to get the annual report in and for us to get on the calendar?
By January 28th.
January 28th.
I would
Alright,
like
I
it
will-
sooner than that.
Okay, so I lied, so you have to get any feedback to me by January 20th now. Okay, and then for the February 19th to get on this potential schedule for
Yeah, we don't even know if we're on
testifying.
the schedule ourselves
We,
yet.
we will schedule that and then you
You
would
would-
sign up for testimony, or we would
Okay.
invite testimony.
I would say council meetings are a wildly moving target still. The 5th is an opportunity, maybe. I don't wanna promise
Right.
what we can get
Probably
onto
a
that
lot.
agenda necessarily. There are also communication slots. It's limited, but it's direct captive FaceTime that can be very impactful at the top of the council agenda. And I know that they're meeting with people, separate and apart from those public forums. So I think there are a variety of ways to connect. schedules and, you know, allowing your schedules, I think.
You're suggesting that they could reach out to council offices and schedule meetings to meet with them directly, to have conversations.
Right, so that sounds like it could be a good strategy, again, for the ad hoc committee to think through and act upon. Jessica, go ahead.
I was wondering if we should communicate at some point to talk about how Portland Parks Foundation and another entity that we're working with, Intertwine Alliance, and also approaching counselors to just get FaceTime and talk about this issue.
Yes.
And whether it's beneficial to work together or to bombard them.
Talk strategy, we're very fortunate to have board members that reside in, I believe, every district. And so maybe it might be a good way for us to go district by district and have these conversations as well. So I think there's a couple strategies that's on the table that we can decide upon. With that said, if I can broach an ask on who is interested and wants to commit to working on this levy letter and strategizing what that plan could look like in being in conversation with council.
Chris and Casey have both raised their
Chris,
hands.
Casey, wonderful. I would also like to join that. We can get this on it. Others.
I mean, I will be a listener because I'm sure we'll be doing something similar, so.
Be in conversation with Jessica from the Portland Parks Foundation. Sounds good. Any others that want to jump on?
Someone that doesn't have the letter C in the beginning of their name.
The 3 Cs, yeah.
We got some A's, we got some B's.
All right. Thank you so much for those who volunteered. If those folks are still thinking about whether they have the capacity to do so and later on wants to join in, please email Chris, Casey, or Corbin. Thank you so much. Any other questions?
Just a quick comment. I just want to like kind of pull the curtain back a little bit of how the council clerk is operating and scheduling things. Right now, we have it planned for February 19th to present the levy. That is still tentative because the council president has the discretion to move forward with that or not. That being said, council president is Councilor Purtle Guinea, Mr. Portland Parks Board, so I believe Councilor Purtle Guinea has been aware of how important this levy talk is. But that's goes for submitting the annual report to council if we were to do so on February 5th. A lot of it is at the discretion of the council president. Whereas before we kind of were like, oh, is there space? Okay, we're taking up room. And that's not really like that right now. But and also February 19th council session will be in the evening at 6 p.m. since the third Wednesday of the month. All council sessions are at 6 p.m. to provide opportunity for accessibility to community members. But just to keep that in mind, if you were interested in just providing testimony, it's not in the morning, it's in the evening.
Thank you so much. And so with all that said, I want to put forward a motion for Casey, Chris, and Corbin to form an ad hoc committee with the understanding that we will be penning a letter based on the levy, as well as discuss strategizing testimony with council. Do I have a second?
Include me in that.
And the foundation.
And the Portland Parks Foundation. Do I have a second?
A second.
Wonderful. All those who are in favor? Any against? Do we have any abstentions? Looks like that passes, so thank you so much. And if it's okay with the board, I'm gonna go ahead and conclude. We are at 6:22 and shift over to the director's report. Right, does that work?
Yes.
Yes.
Wonderful, thank you so much.
I believe DCA Shumansky is gonna take her leave.
I just want to thank you so much for letting me come and listen and participate in this. I'm so grateful for your service.
Thank you for taking the time out to join us.
So a little bit more on council and then I'll switch gears. So tomorrow evening, we're bringing the Parks Levy report and the Parks Levy Oversight Committee reports to council to be accepted as reports. And then the next day, Thursday at 9:30 in the morning, the Vibrant Community Service Area onboarding work session is going to be at council as well. We all should have received an invitation from DCA Szymanski to join us. And we're really excited. It was interesting putting together a slide deck that was service area wide and didn't just chunk us out. I think it flows really nicely and I think everyone will have a nice time watching that and it'll be very informative. The onboarding tour that was supposed to happen also this week, it was originally scheduled for this week, has been rescheduled until March 21st. We have not developed a run of show for the tour as yet because council has just generally requested that the tour duration be shorter. So we have not reconvened to figure out what that's gonna look like now, because we have a lot of ground to cover and making it shorter makes it challenging. But we will report back when we know more and if there's an opportunity. And now I know that everyone reads my report, all 16 pages of it, but I just wanted to pull out a couple of highlights, some of which made it to the report and some that didn't. Last week, Parks submitted a 2040 Metro Planning and Development Grant application requesting $750,000 for the redevelopment of the Tom McCall Waterfront Park Bowl. The idea is the scope includes the development of an RFQ for a creative director to facilitate a national design competition. So this project is in partnership with the Human Access Project, Willie Levinson, as well as the Portland Waterfront Pavilion. Director is Peter Johnson. So we're hopeful that we'll receive those funds. It'll be a great project. So kudos to Lauren and her team who put together that application. Also excited to share that the Bureau has just completed recertification of our city's park system as salmon safe. We were the first park system to be certified salmon safe in 2004. And over the course of the past 20 years, the Bureau has demonstrated its commitment to ecological stewardship and served as a regional and national example of environmental restoration in a municipal park system. And so big ups to City Nature, Land Stewardship, and others. This is a huge accomplishment. I mean, not only to be the first park system, but to have maintained that certification over the last 20 years, given all of the challenges we have in the city landscape. And then I'm just gonna keep on rolling with the good news. I'm thrilled to share that Portland Parks Preschool has recently been allocated 154 preschool for all slots at 9 community centers for the 2025-26 school year. So we're really excited to be partnering with Multnomah County to give 3- and 4-year-olds access to free, inclusive, culturally responsive preschool experiences. So hats off to Maximo Behrens and his team for preparing the application and going through the very rigorous process of getting accredited. So we're really excited about that. And then keeps on coming. Our application for Tree City USA was approved. So we are officially recognized as a Tree City USA for the 48th consecutive year. These are all just sort of like, medals of honor. And we've also applied to be a Tree Cities of the World. So that's an international effort to recognize cities and towns committed to ensuring that their urban forests and trees are properly maintained, sustainably managed, and duly celebrated. So Jen Cairo and her team, thank you for making sure that all of our good work is being acknowledged and recognized, both nationally and internationally. And then the last thing I just wanted to mention, because you've probably read it in the news, the city is currently in negotiations with 3 bargaining units, including the CPPW, City of Portland Professional Workers, the District Council of Trade Unions, DCTU, and the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, AFSCME. And that there is a possibility of a strike, and we're in the process of making preparations to make sure that we can continue to provide critical city services. And so that's, we have several staff people who are working hard to ensure that we can continue on seamlessly if that should occur. So just wanted to let folks know that there might be a few speed bumps if that happens.
Thank you so much, Director Long. Do we have any questions or comments from the board? So I have a question, and it might be a future report. Some of the community-based organizations, community members that I've talked to, thinking about the summer and summer events, which was some events were mentioned within the report. How are we communicating with community members to make community-based events more cost? Tends to be cost prohibitive for a lot of folks. And so how are we communicating to community members about how to get the maybe the grants or reduced permitting for community based events?
So I'm gonna ask Todd to speak a little bit about the permitting question, because I think that's where you're going with this, because the programs that we offer obviously are free to the public. So you're thinking about more folks who want to come in
That might want to
and
produce their
create,
own
right,
culturally relevant
right.
events, and which tends to, there has been some sticking points about how much money they have to put down, how to get through the system to do that. And so are we rolling out in some ways to meet those community members where they are, to discuss the support that parks can lend them to create these events?
Yeah, I'll just talk about kind of two things. We've done that in two different ways. One is through space grants, so do more of like a proactive push of asking people to reach out through an application process similar to like a grant application process. And then the other is I would just encourage anyone you're coming across that's experienced those to reach out directly to our reservation and permit center and ask that they're applying for a grant, or if they're having
a financial barrier.
if they have a financial barrier, to express that during the process. And then we can elevate those to make sure that they get it reviewed, make sure oftentimes that they're free and open to the public. They're not like commercial activities, things like that, or maybe they're a fundraiser that they're doing for a public benefit of a park friends group, things like that, or a neighborhood association. Then those are things that we can discount and help reduce the cost of this barrier.
Sorry, would it be possible to track that and get a report at like
For
the end of
sure.
the summer to see
Yeah,
how
we're
doing with
tracking that now on an annual basis, so we can see everything from sometimes it's small little camps that are free, that are offered in the parks that really don't impact the park, to like a local neighborhood event that's in the park.
Yeah, art day or something.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
And they're, I mean, Todd alluded to it, but the permit fee structure is tiered in such a way that sort of, you know, the more exclusive the event comes, essentially the more expensive, you know, if there's impact, if there's corporate sponsors, if it's a, you know, pay to play event. So
The most important for us really, if anything, is the coordination of through the permitting process. So people engage us and say, hey, I want to bring 100 people to this park, so we know about it, so we can make sure the park's ready for them when they come. And then also
there's no
like
conflicting
sometimes
events.
there's other things that people don't know about, like you have to go to Multnomah County to get a food handler's permit if you're gonna give out food and things like that. So there really is a resource. The fee itself is kind of secondary for us. It's more about getting people to engage with the permit center so we know what's happening in the parks.
Do you ever hold an event to say, oh, if you're interested in doing an event, we're gonna hold a sort of town hall or gathering or what have you, or is it case by case basis that we send them through the system?
Yeah, for right now, generally case by case. However, we did try an event. So we worked with the Office of Violence Prevention And they have a whole bunch of community partners that are doing kind of free and open events. Sometimes they're doing affordable housing promotions, sometimes they're doing other kind of free public education type events in parks. And so we actually did a training for those nonprofits so that they knew how to engage with us. And we did a pilot for 6 months and saying, hey, in these parks, we want to promote that you're going to get a free permit. You're just going to have to apply once. So that was a pilot project, but generally right now, just encourage people to engage us and then we'll try to make sure they have a successful experience.
Great, thank
Yeah.
you so much.
Yeah.
Any question from the board? Any comments regarding the director's report? Lynn, go ahead.
Part of the one packet was talking about how we are able to eliminate some rule signage.
This is the administrative rules.
Yeah, and I didn't have the benefit to see how these rules were placed in situation or whatever. But are we going to more and more relying on more graphic oriented signage? And because there's some like, oh, no smoking, we don't need that anymore because everybody knows no smoking are. But there must be some sign that says no smoking. But then when we say we take some of this away, it's because there are already overarching signage that takes care of that kind of rule posting, or so it's like a little two-part questions here. Are there already overarching signage that is covering what we are going to take away? And the other part is, are these new overall signage are all mostly graphic oriented, so it doesn't need to have someone who knows the language to understand? There was one, no smoking. I thought, okay, well, smoking comes in many forms. So how
So
do you determine?
I'm sorry, I think you're talking about the admin rules, the administrative rules and the change of the administrative
Right.
rules? Okay.
The
So that's-
ordinances?
Right, so that's one, that's the Title 20 that we've been talking about for 6 months or so, 9 months, and where are we on that?
Yeah, so city council approved the code updates that came to the Parks Board. Follow on from the code updates, then there's administrative rules. Those will be posted for public comment and we'll get feedback from those. And then separate from that, I think what you're talking about is then like, how do we implement those and how do we post those? And we have an active project that's led by our planning group
Not so
and
active anymore.
Parks and Recreation. Basically, we need to retool all of our signage. We have decades worth of signage out there. And so we really want to trend to more things like you're saying, universal symbols wherever possible. We've even used different ways where like when we can and appropriate on projects, we use QR codes, so then we can go to multiple languages. So there's lots of different ideas, but that project is still like working through
Yeah.
exactly how we'd execute that.
And that's in our planning division under Lauren. Unfortunately, the planner who was heading that up has left the agency. And so I don't know if it's been reassigned or if it's paused right now, but they had started to do quite a bit of work around inventorying what we have. And then a lot of research around the universal design idea. Many parks have one sign instead of, I call it sign pollution, you know.
You
where
have
there's-
multiple
Yeah.
entries.
So we've been having the conversation, and I think we're a little bit delayed on that project. I don't know if Lauren is able to come off mute to let us know if that's being reassigned or.
Yeah, so thanks, Adina. Yeah, that was, Victor will be doing that. So the person we just hired to replace Grace will be working on that project, but he literally just started this week, so.
More to come.
I just wanted to jump in regarding the whatever signage or how are we gonna get the information to folks? We might wanna rethink the QR codes only because there's been some cyber issues connected to.
That has been considered, yeah.
Yeah, so also just having like a website that people can type in instead of the QR codes.
Yeah, they've been doing a lot of research about it, and market research and otherwise, so.
Or you could have like augmented reality. I mean, that might be also helpful.
Well, we're also
Something
wanna
think
make sure that our signage is accessible and available in as many languages as possible. And that's why the graphics are often a good option.
Yeah, I'm just worried about the QR codes now because
Yeah.
they're just zapping people's information off. their phone. But thank you so much. Are there any other questions, comments from the board?
I don't know when is a good time to ask this. I'm gonna just go ahead. and
Go.
ask. Is there any follow-up on the great idea of greening the Burnside Bridge? Whatever happened to that? And how it connects with the waterfront green loop and
Where are we in the process?
maybe
of
it's
that?
too late now.
Did you get that design right, Lauren?
I heard that, yeah. So when we have been working with Multnomah County, right now, our main focus is on connecting the bridge to the East Bank Esplanade and the bridge down to Tom McCall Park, Waterfront Park. They have looked at that idea of the green, Multnomah County says they have looked at the idea of greening the bridge itself, and it has a lot of potential problems for them. And they don't think they're gonna be able to do that within budget, but they are trying to focus on greening immediately adjacent to it instead of right exactly on the bridge. That's kind of where we're at right now with them. But they're
Maybe
still.
it sounds like you can have a little design competitions to come up with creative and affordable ideas. Yeah.
Yeah, for putting it in the infrastructure, even if it means that the greening might come later with other
Yeah.
funding or what have you. It's kind of like with a green roof, if you don't build it to accommodate the green space, then the green space will never be able to come to fruition, even if it's 10 years down the line.
Seems very too premature to just say no. Sure, there are ways to do it.
Is it more about long-term maintenance or the structural infrastructure,
Both, actually, from what they're saying, and their budget, of course, it's always a budget issue. At the moment, like I said, we're focusing on what the connections are gonna be down from the bridge to our parks on both sides of the river. And they're actually doing a lot of work in that regard, and we've been spending a lot of time talking about a funicular or inclinator to connect it to the East Bank, and then next we'll focus on the Tom McCall side, but more to come on that. I did mention your, Swen, we did talk a little bit about your greening of the bridge idea, and they had actually looked at that because there are examples online of different conceptual ideas for that.
It's actually Dr. Corbin's idea. I was trying to bring the seed to the discussion, and I know how these things go. Eventually, you always just kick yourself for not being aggressive enough in the conversation.
Hopefully they can think of something like along pedestrian health and safety with incorporating the green space, but I rather a slow yes than a quick no. So I would like to hear more as it unfolds. So could we expect a report? Whether that's in the land use and infrastructure group, or which reminds me, Lauren, we probably want to talk and figure out a better name for that group that's more descriptive. So I might be reaching out with you soon.
Yeah, we've been working with David on different topics, and the Burnside Bridge people have been there a couple times already, right, David? Yeah.
Do you want me to check and see if there's anyone downstairs? Or?
Oh, that I would totally
I can do
appreciate
that.
that. Thank you so much.
I'm closer to the door.
Is there a time that we can expect an update, or David, if you think, when is the next time you think that should be brought to the board?
You know, I just don't know what the timeline for the rest of that process is, Lauren. I don't know if you've, you know, where they are in their design. Like, is it even open for, I know that there was lots of work done on the bridge type and the arch type and the bridge width. And so I don't know actually when they're moving into design. So I would have to lean on Lauren and the team to find out when is the next opportunity for us to actually provide any meaningful input. What do you think?
I'll check back with, I can check back with them on that.
Can the park boards be kind of proactive in taking conversation forward? Because if we do this passively, it will never happen.
So I guess there's two things to consider. One, when is the next opportunity for the board to participate in regarding this particular project, and whether that should go to a land use and infrastructure working group, and when does the land and infrastructure working group think the full board should come in to provide feedback or participate in the discussion?
David, we can circle back. Can we circle back with you next month? And see if we can set up a time for them to come in. If you'd like them to come into the full board, they will, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'll look to the land use and infrastructure working group to let us know when they think it would be most beneficial for it to come before the full board.
Well, I would think, if you're really serious about continuing to push on the Green Bridge, that would be now.
Okay.
Because they're gonna move without it.
Yeah, they're starting design now, right?
Right.
Right, so at the end of the month,
Yeah.
I believe we have a board check-in for the agenda. So Director Long, and Michelle and Joey, maybe we can figure
I'll put it
out
on
how
the
to put
agenda.
it on the agenda sooner rather than later, if the full board believes that this would be beneficial. So just really quickly opening up, are there any thoughts? Would this be beneficial? Should we go forward with that to schedule it as soon as possible? Or does the board think that there's other priorities that should be centered?
I'm wondering if Lauren said it's sort of imminent, they're designing now, we are not gonna have a meeting now for another month.
Mhm.
So I just want to express some concern about wasting 4 weeks. If it's that important, I would suggest that it goes to land use.
Lauren, is it still concept? Is that what phase of the
Yeah,
design
they're still in conceptual design, yeah.
But our window of opportunity will evaporate.
All right, maybe land use and infrastructure, you can take the lead on this and let us know, and let the board know when we need to step in. Or what we should request, or what we should ask, as far as what can be brought into a full board meeting. Because I think we also need to remember that we are the platform for the public to participate as well. And so what does that mean by either having it in the working group or having it on our agenda as as part of our board meeting? So I can reach out to you, David, and just see what the working group thinks about it.
Okay.
Any other thoughts? Again, this is also an opportunity if there's an ad hoc group that wants to be made to follow this specifically because they have a particular concern or want to provide attention on it, that will work too. I saw a hand pop up.
Yeah, that was me, but it is on a different advocacy topic that I just wanted to remind people about, so I can wait till this is over.
Yeah, give us 1 second and then I'll turn it over to you just really quickly. We're at the time for public comment. Do we have anybody here for public comment? And Patty, thank you for going down and checking.
No, we do not.
And there's nobody on line. Wonderful. So Ally, go ahead.
Yeah, just first a big thanks to Sue-Ann, who's going to be testifying on behalf of the board's position on the PGE's Harborton reliability project. So that's happening on January 29th. But I also wanted to remind board members that you don't need to represent the board to testify. You can just go in as a community member, and they're going to be it's kind of a weird format. Usually you can sign up ahead of time to testify or submit comments verbally. But this time it's really going to be raising your hand in a virtual room. So it's a virtual thing. And I think from 9 to 10 is going to be more, in the morning is going to be more the city talking and then PGE responding. But after that, they're going to open it up to the public. And it's a really great opportunity for, again, so important that Sue-Ann is going to be there and represent the board. But any of us can go and raise our hand and give our perspective on the Harborton Reliability Project and its impact on Forest Park. So if anyone's curious on getting more information about that, just hit me up or yeah, I'm happy to share that information.
Thank you, Ally. So we're gonna kind of do a rapid fire for the working group reports. First, the Board Affairs Working Group. Is there anything to report?
No.
Thank you, Casey. Then we have Land Use and Infrastructure Working Group. Anything to report in?
I don't have anything. Anyone
Thank
else?
you. All right, thank you, David. Then the Financial Sustainability Working Group. Casey again.
I noted that my thrilling minutes were not included in the packet. If anybody wants them, just email me, but I will just say all it was were updates, and we got more updated today than we were back then.
All right, thank you, Casey. Community Engagement Working Group.
I'd just like to share that at the meeting, the Equity Inclusion Manager, Amanda, did a presentation which was really informative and a lot about what's going on and her evaluation as the new person, and exciting. I think she's gonna bring a lot to the parks.
Thank you so much, Patty. And last but not least is the Recreation, Arts, Culture, and Nature Working Group, which hasn't met, but we're looking to get them online in the next month or so. So Ally, let's connect and try to get that off the ground.
Absolutely.
Who is the group now? Because it wasn't it Matt? It was Adam.
Right now we have Ally, myself, I believe Allison, as well as there's one more.
I think Bill.
Bill, yes, I think. And if other folks are interested, we're gonna be kind of changing it over a little bit. So this will be the time to have that discussion. We might be keeping the same, I guess, description of it, or we might be augmenting it. So if you want to jump on board on how we're gonna move forward with this, please let me know. I'm looking forward to having more engaged conversations around nature, parks, green spaces, and recreation. So thank you so much for working groups for your work. And last but not least, and thank you so much for holding on, Jessica. We have the Portland Parks Foundation report.
Report. You know, guess I can kind of give a high level view of 2025, new year. And our work plan for the year. We've got our Everybody Plays campaign. Things are happening in all three of the parks that we're raising money for. Raymond Park, we have the renderings, the playground is set, so we'll be putting together communication on that new area shortly. George Park is in full gear with the project advisory team, and we have February 27th planned for our first larger community engagement at Roosevelt High School. So we're working with the kids outside to develop a community engagement event that is a little bit more similar to the TKO Fest vibe. And then Portland Heights Park, we are diving into fundraising on that. So that fundraising will be done by the end of the year. That's our 2025. The Elk, the full project team met earlier this month to kick off really the start of kind of the construction phase. We're waiting on submittals from the contractor there that will include a project schedule. But all things point to substantial completion with the elk returning in 2025. So we'll have more confirmation of that when the contractor submits the schedule later this month. And then we have all of our friends and allies initiatives, small grants. And we're kind of the big one, I guess the first one is our Parks Champion Award that opens tomorrow. So please, Parks Board, if you want to submit nominations for outstanding volunteers, I encourage you to do so. And then we'll be opening up our Joey Pope Leadership Award later in February and planning our spring summit. We're also having some conversations about a year-long leadership program that builds off of the Joey Pope Award to really focus on emerging leadership in parks and to kind of create more infrastructure there. So that is exciting. We've had some great conversations with some people putting that together. And we are also in deep conversation with the city and the Intertwine Alliance about the Parks Levy. So I'm sure we will be busy on that initiative in 2025, securing funding for parks. I guess I also bring to this group and just flagging that there is a rather vague but potential additional funding source for the park blocks. I had emailed actually Director Long and Lauren earlier today, but I know there's a infrastructure working group here. I would just flag that there's a very interested donor with a substantial amount of funds that is interested, has money that is very specifically restricted to parks blocks. And it's pretty though open-ended on what it can fund within it. So I'm meeting with the advisor next week. And so they are just curious what opportunities are out there.
You say park blocks, which park blocks?
Both.
South.
But like the
South and north.
Yes, yeah. Yeah. Right. So that would be great to have some information there more specifically about like Darcel, if there's an opportunity there, if I know there's Szymanski, and if there's anything else. So to kind of give.
I believe our budget's still pretty tight on Darcel, but and we're doing some conceptual designs on North Park blocks for the PNC block right now. So Lauren, when you get to that email, let's loop back with Jessica.
Yep, will do. Thanks.
Great, and then I don't want you to dive too deeply into it without knowing, as you know, I don't want to waste your time in that sense, but if just we can get some high level.
Like,
yeah,
whether there's possibilities, especially if there's something that's already happening.
Yes, exactly. And I think I'll stop there because it's 6:56.
Thank you so much, Jessica. Are there any questions from the board? Just really quickly, please send me any of your and all of your feedback on the annual report. I am looking for any highlights that you would like to make sure it's recorded regarding any contributions from the working group. If you served as a board member on any committees outside of the working group and outside of the board, please let me know what those titles are so I can add those so folks know what we're doing as a board. And just really trying to remember that we're going from, I believe, July 2023 to December of 2024. So it's kind of a year and a half in review. Please send me that by, I'm gonna say January 20th, like I said 25th before, sooner rather than later, so we can go ahead and get that ready for council, for city council and the mayor. And with that said, are there any questions from the board before we adjourn? All right, gonna go ahead and adjourn the meeting. We are at 6:58. Thank you so much, board, and Happy New Year.
Thank you.
Thank you, bye-bye.
Bye.